Welcome back to Christian Questions on News Talk 102.3 FM, WXLM. Our subject this morning, did God ever advocate slavery? To be a part of our program, call 860-442-6102. That's 442-6102.
And Jonathan, as we come into this last segment here of the first hour, we have a call. So let's get the call on right now. We're talking about slavery. We're talking about the biblical perspective and trying to compare it with the American perspective. And so far, we've seen something very different. Good morning. Welcome to Christian Questions.
Good morning, Rick. This is Julius.
Good morning.
Great topic.
Good morning, Julius.
Appreciate it. I want to go back, if I may, a little bit to the notion that, it has been said that the Bible is an old fiddle on which any tune can be played.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I have a problem with that in this way. That sort of demeans the value of the Bible. My perspective on that is that the Bible is a book that has to be studied to be appreciated and harmonized from cover to cover. And this subject of slavery, I think, is misunderstood. And I like your approach to it so far. And your question is, did God ever advocate slavery? And the answer, I would say no, not in the sense that we would define slavery.
Right.
And bondage. We associate it with bondage, cruelty, exploitation. So, within the biblical context that you're treating this morning, my take on it is this. Slavery, servitude in those days was a byproduct necessitated by economics,
right.
a form of employment. Since the conditions dictated this form of servitude or employment, God did establish guidelines for them, that these folks that were so utilized, that humane treatment be given to them. And here's an interesting thought, which I don't know if you touched upon or you might. There was a potential release during the year of Jubilee.
Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet.
You haven't got...
Yeah, you're running ahead here.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But anyway, so I one of my favorite cliches, adage, whatever you want to call it, when during the scene there in the Ten Commandments, when Joshua made this statement, that God made man, and man made slaves.
Mm-hmm.
So the abuse part, the exploitation, that's man's doing, not God's. God allowed it to happen for practical reasons. Thanks for sharing. God bless.
Thanks, Julius. We appreciate your call.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
And Jonathan, Julius is just giving an introduction to where we're heading next. Because we're going to be looking at the law just as soon as we get a exit out from the Exodus, so to speak. At the end of the last segment, we talked about the slavery in Egypt became more and more cruel and oppressive and difficult and cruel and harsh and severe. Read Exodus chapter 3, verse 7.
Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their suffering.
Now, it's interesting that the word taskmaster here is an entirely different word than taskmaster before.
That's right, Rick. It's Strong's number 5065, and it means to drive an animal, a workman, a debtor, an army, to tax, harass, or tyrannize. Okay, so you have tyranny that has come in, and it is God's words that he's saying that it has become a tyrannical type of an environment here. So we can see, folks, that there is a stark contrast between the slavery in Egypt versus the slavery, quote-unquote, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They had much more along the lines of indentured servants that were working with them and essentially, in many, many ways, were treated as part of their family. So now let's fast forward a little bit further. We're trying to build this systematically and look at slavery in the context of the Jewish law. And this is what Julius was alluding to. Because
The Jewish law was a lot of God's words to his chosen people about how they should organize and govern themselves. So again, we're gonna look at a paragraph, part of a paragraph anyway, from McClintock and Strong's Encyclopedia in the context of Jewish slavery.
In the case of war carried on for conquest or revenge, there were but two modes of dealing with the captives: putting them to death or reducing them to slavery. As citizenship involved the condition of freedom and independence, it was almost necessary to offer the alternative of disfranchisement to all who thought poverty or any other contingency were unable to support themselves in independence. It should further be noted that a laboring class, in our sense of the term, was almost unknown to the nations of antiquity. Hired service was regarded as incompatible with freedom, and hence the slave in many cases occupied the same social position as the servant or laborer of modern times, though differing from him in regard to political status. The Hebrew designation of the slave shows that service was the feature of his condition, for the term ebed, usually applied to him, is derived from the verb signifying to work, and the very same term is used in the reference to offices of high trust held by free men. In short, service and slavery would have been to the ear of the Hebrew equivalent terms, though he fully recognized grades of servitude according as the servant was a Hebrew or a non-Hebrew, and if the latter, according as he was bought with money,
okay,
or born in the house.
Oh, I'm sorry. So there's a couple of things in there, Jonathan, I think that bear repeating. First, it should be further noticed that a laboring class, in our sense of the term, was almost unknown to the nations of antiquity. In other words, when you had people working for you, they were your servants. You didn't have somebody come in and punch a clock and then go home to their own home and then decide, the next day, I don't like this job, I'll go get another job. It just wasn't that way.
Right.
So it was a very different kind of an environment, and this environment did exist within the Jewish nation, within the law, the confines of the law that God gave to his people. And also the fact that slavery and service were interchangeable, because the word actually has both meanings. To be sort of bound to that person, but to be a worker. There was no working class. So when the work had to be done, that's what you had. You had slaves or servants, however you want to frame that. Interesting thought, though, in terms of the treatment of these workers. And let's read Deuteronomy. And this is now in the context of Jewish law. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 14 and 15.
But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male or female slave, or your ox or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or the resident alien in your town.